I'm Luis Scott, managing partner of Bader Scott Injury Lawyers, one of the fastest growing law firms in the country, and I'm also the co-founder of 8-Figure Firm Consulting. I've successfully built multiple companies by focusing on leadership, operations, and culture. Using these principles, my companies have generated close to $100 million in revenue. But before any of this success, I started my legal career as a receptionist, and I worked my way up to becoming managing partner. In each episode of this podcast, I sit down with leaders and entrepreneurs who have had the guts to step out on their own and the courage to face adversity. They share with us their tips for achievement, the challenges they have faced, and the glory of success. I welcome you to the Guts and Glory Show.
Chad Franzen here, one of the co-hosts of the Guts and Glory Show. We feature top leaders who share challenges of leadership, the guts it takes to succeed, and the glory of success. This episode is brought to you by 8-Figure Firm Consulting. At 8-Figure Firm, they help law firms to grow to 8 figures. Luis Scott was telling me when he started his career, he was working over 80 hours a week to make partner. After that, he finally started his own firm and wished he had someone walking him through all the steps to growth. At 8-Figure Firm, they show you how to develop a business that works for you instead of you working for it. Go to 8figurefirm.com to learn more. Today we have Angela Jones, founder and attorney at Brightside Law, located in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Her civil litigation experience includes family law, business, employment, real estate, and probate matters. It's Angela's passion to provide dynamic, dedicated, client-focused litigation advocacy. Angela, thanks so much for joining me today. How are you?
I'm great. It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Sure, thank you. So tell me a little bit more about what Brightside Law does and the kinds of clients you serve.
Okay. So Brightside Law is a family-focused firm. And by that, we do focus on creating legacy through our work, legacy for children through our work with people who are going through matters that affect families, people in particular, versus, say, businesses. Not that businesses don't need help, but we've decided to niche down on the personal.
How did you know, at what point in your life did you know you wanted to become an attorney?
Oh, that's an interesting story. I actually had never thought about being an attorney until I was in the last semester of my social work curriculum at Austin Peay State University. And I went in and lamenting to my advisor that I couldn't get, because I couldn't give advice to any of my social work clients in the practicum. And he suggested to me that I might want to become a lawyer because lawyers get paid to give advice. I never thought about that. The only lawyer I'd ever interacted with was my own divorce attorney, who was, not to put too fine a point on it, not an ideal specimen of what a family lawyer should be. And so, I certainly hadn't thought I wanted to be like him. But through a series of events, in about a semester, I switched my major, got a full scholarship to law school, and the rest is sort of history.
Wow, very nice. How did you get your start then in the legal industry?
Well, I did really well in law school, and I did some internships with the Department of Justice. I went to the scholarship I was awarded. It was a public interest scholarship. So I did an internship with the Department of Justice, and then I had an opportunity to work with a business and commercial litigation firm in Nashville, Tennessee. I took a hiatus when I had a child who was diagnosed with a birth defect to stay home with him, and picked up some family law cases just to sort of supplement that. And when I was moving with the military, that's what I did as well. So when I settled back in Colorado Springs about 9 years ago, I started working with a real estate litigation firm because that was in my wheelhouse from when I worked doing commercial business litigation. But I got family law cases in, they just started pouring in. And so I rapidly developed that area of practice and moved to management of another firm, and eventually ended up opening Brighter Day about 2.5 years ago.
Okay. So let me go back to your decision to go to law school.
Okay.
You had been studying to become a social worker. What was kind of your impression of attorneys when you at that time, when you heard the word attorney? What was kind of your impression, and how did you see yourself fitting into kind of that role at that time?
No, I didn't. I didn't see myself fitting into that role at all. The few attorneys that I'd interacted with were like my first attorney, I ended up getting a much better attorney later in the process, was, just not very dialed in. It didn't know about my facts, didn't prepare in advance, drove around in this big fancy car, but, was definitely not earning his money. And then I had a professor that was like an adjunct professor who came in, and his big thing was GED to JD. And he was kind of a slime ball, to be honest. So, and then my ex-husband's attorney was just a female, and she cried a lot. I was just like, what? It was just a mess. So I had none of that resonated with me whatsoever. And it wasn't until I started working with higher caliber attorneys through the Department of Justice. It was much more, casual in terms of dress, but it was in DC. So these were extraordinarily smart attorneys who were doing contract work, and then had an opportunity to work with, larger, big firm, big law firms, that I started to go, okay, this is a profession that resonates.
What did you see kind of in them that you didn't see in your prior experience with attorneys that made you think like, oh yeah, this is something that I'd be interested in doing, or I'd be good at?
Well, I think it's a groundedness, a polish, a professionalism, balanced with actually caring about who they were serving. I mean, even at the Department of Justice, he was brilliant, but our job was to manage contracts and work with the vendor contracts for the Bureau of Prisons, and he was very concerned about making sure that even the inmates that the Bureau of Prisons was serving had the materials that they needed, that there weren't supply chain issues, and holding vendors accountable to get them what they needed. And then at the larger firm, it was much more white glove, if that makes sense. Everybody was very collegial, but they were extraordinarily invested in their clients, and, serving their clients in that capacity. And that's not something I really saw with that family law attorney that I had worked with, especially initially.
So you had worked in the legal industry for a few years, and you started Brighter Day Law. How did that kind of come about?
Well, when I first started working with a small firm here, I was actually started as a contract worker doing contract real estate work, construction defect litigation, breaches of contract, failure to disclose, things of that nature. And I got those family law cases and taught myself family law, and got involved with the family law bar here, and found a lot of professionals, great professionals in our community. As I developed that, it became larger, and it didn't really fit. That family law practice really didn't fit in with the practice areas of the firm I initially joined, which was a real estate firm, if that makes sense. So I was recruited to come over and work with a firm that did primarily mass torts and personal injury work, to develop an hourly side practice. And there was some criminal work that they were doing on the side as well. And so that was a little bit better fit, because we were working with people, advocating, with people and for people to get, their personal lives straightened out, So I worked with them for quite a bit of time, maybe I think it was about 3 years, until I got to a point where it just made sense to me to go out, peel away from that mass torts situation, and really just dial down on helping, individuals walking through their own litigation.
Sure. Great. Do you have a favorite story from your practice so far?
Oh, I've got a number of, just favorite stories, but I will say, I think one of my favorite stories is because we've been just growing rapidly at the beginning of the year. And I shared this, in our look back for 2021. At the beginning of this year, I was effectively a sole practitioner. I had 2 paralegals supporting me, and that was in 2021. I had 2 paralegals supporting me. We had just hired a part-time legal assistant, and I had a firm administrator who was effectively, reception, intake, full part-time legal assistant, billing clerk, everything. We call her firm administrator, but she was pretty much everything but attorney and paralegal. And now coming into our going into 2022 and doing that look back, we have 21 of us total. And to include, I think there are 7 attorneys besides myself. And I just, it was in that first quarter where it really got to, I couldn't keep pace with the demand. And I was just like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going to just dive in and grow this firm.
I'd love to talk about some of the practices learned in your, some of the lessons learned in your practice journey. How did you discover 8-Figure Firm and Louise Scott?
Actually, I started with another well-known group doing, like who does fractional management of law firms, and I learned a great deal there. And one of the gals that I met through that organization invited me to come and meet Louise at their first mastermind. And when I was there reading Louise's personal mission, it really resonated with me as well, because it was clear to me that his personal beliefs, his, convictions, especially as a Christian, were informing how he did business. And so for me moving forward, I wanted to work with someone who understood that it's not just the business, financial, or intellectual, but also the spiritual that has to be taken care of in doing a business plan or running a business.
So what would you say are some of the lessons learned from Louise?
Oh, so, I think the big thing that I've learned from Louise is that you can build a very predictable growth scenario or growth plan based upon, getting into the numbers. Like it really is. It's, if you apply this formula, this will produce this predictable result. And you heard that, but there's very specific metrics, percentages that we've been able to look at. And he's applied, I'd been using EOS, traction, what have you, and he doesn't use EOS and traction per se, but it just seemed very intuitively he conducts business and runs, meeting cadences and things of that nature in the same way. So not only does I found that Louise has that just intuitive sense about how to implement best practices, but he dives a little bit deeper insofar as he's very analytical when it comes to the numbers and percentages and what works and what does not work.
So how has your practice kind of changed after having implemented some of the things that Louise has suggested?
Well, I think the main thing is my personal confidence in setting the next year's goal. Because like when I set my goal for 2021, which we exceeded, it was really sort of like, well, I guess I'll come up with, and I'll just kind of add these people, and I'm backwards planned as well. If this person bills out that, and we do this, and and that was great, but it was really kind of a shot in the dark. And now I have felt, my goal for increase for 2021 was to increase by 30%. I ended up increasing by more like 50%.
Wow.
But now I've set a goal to increase by 250%, even at the $1.5 million run rate. Not run rate, but the $1.5 million, top line revenue that I brought in last year, because I believe it's, it's not a stretch goal. It's an absolutely attainable goal. And I know how to get there.
Okay. Well, best wishes for that. Since this is the Guts and Glory show, can you tell me a couple stories? One is a gut story, something that where you had to kind of overcome odds to get to what you wanted, and then maybe a glory story. Why don't you start out with the gut story?
Well, and it really, I think the gut story comes with, having opened my own law firm 2.5 years ago. And it was the time that I spent at the last firm I was managing, the lessons were invaluable, but I hung on way too long to that position. And because, and I don't know why I was afraid to kind of extend myself, get out there on my own. And when it came to, essentially a breaking point, I gave appropriate notice, but I set up and began running my own firm essentially within a month. to include, from the ground up. And we were in business, and, we were at a $500,000, run rate by the end of the first 5 months we were in business. But it really did take, okay, you can do this. This isn't beyond your capacities. It's not too much work. Looking back and really assessing myself and where I'd come, notwithstanding the whole, I've been out of practice for all these years. I've been a stay-at-home mom. I'm a military spouse. I can't do this, challenging myself to go, sister, look at what you've already done. This is gonna maybe not be easy, but you've got it.
Very nice. Very nice. What about a glory story? Kind of one just that you're particularly proud of?
Well, funnily, we just, when we did the 2020 rollout meeting, I really just, it went through and I'm like, guys, this is what we had planned to do last year. Here's the places where we succeeded. There were a couple places we partially succeeded. So we're going to redouble our efforts to make sure that those get taken care of in the coming year. And I also laid out the entire business plan for the firm to include numbers and, exactly what we were doing and how we were going to reach those numbers. And at the feedback, we had it laid out in a PowerPoint and, went through everything in about 20, 25 minutes. And then, I opened the floor for my staff to, ask questions, make comments, and, repeatedly, they were thanking me for being transparent, for explaining what we're doing in a clear way and inviting them in. And a lot of them, sort of contrasted other places that they had been where, there were a lot of words, but no real substance or action put behind what they said to their values or said their style attributes. And so I felt I didn't ask for those accolades or affirmation from my staff, but it sure was nice to get that feedback.
What would you say is kind of like a key to success for somebody who wants to start their own firm, maybe branch out from their job to their firm?
Well, depending on your background, I would say if you haven't run a business, that you really have to treat it as a business. What we have here are law businesses, and many attorneys, I worked in business and commercial litigation. So you'd think that I would know how to run a business, but it's very different than, to advise someone about, business practices from a legal perspective and actually become, a law business owner, a service business owner. And there really are parameters, metrics, things that, you need to take care of. And I would say initially it's really fantastic if you can get the support that you need, fractionally, to ensure that you're covering sort of the bases. Like you're the chief visionary officer, I think as Simon Sinek would say, versus the COO. But you really need someone in that chief operations seat. You need someone in that chief financial officer seat. So that, and then eventually, chief marketing officer, things of that nature, because there are many parts of the business and you can't be the product and, effectively run the business, especially without support.
Sure. That's a great perspective. Hey, it's been great talking to you today, Angela. How can people find out more about Brighter Day Law?
Yeah, you can reach out to us in Colorado Springs through our website, which is www.brighterdaylaw.com.
Okay, great. Final question for you. Do you have any books that you have found particularly valuable in terms of managing your firm and your practice?
Absolutely. I love the 4 agreements, and I'll just kind of make sure I'm not misstating them anyway. It goes over 4 agreements that you need to make essentially with yourself. And that is to be impeccable with your word, not to take anything personally, don't make assumptions, and always do your best. So, we routinely reflect back in my law firm about, we've done that, covered that in the book club, and we routinely reflect back on that, when it comes to, hey, did we deliver this on time? Be impeccable with your word. Don't take anything personally. Okay, this person was having a bad day, and so on.
Okay, great. The 4 agreements. Hey, Angela, it's been great to talk to you. Thank you so much for everything.
Absolutely.
So long, everybody.
You've been listening to the Guts and Glory Show with Louise Scott. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to share. For more information on this episode, please see the show notes at www.gutsandgloryshow.com. And join us next time as we talk to another leader in business that had the guts to overcome all odds for the glory of success.